There is a moment, on clear nights, when the sky seems like a perfect mechanism. The constellations return to their places, the planets advance with steady slowness, the moon changes its face with an almost domestic precision. Then, suddenly, something appears that should not be there. A pale blade, a smudge with a trail, an oblique mark that cuts through the order. For centuries, that appearance was interpreted as a warning. Not because human beings were naive, but because the spectacle was truly anomalous. An object that is born from nothing, remains for weeks, sometimes for months, and then vanishes. A comet resembles no other celestial body visible to the naked eye. It is not a fixed point like a star, it is not a disk like a planet, it is not a light that rises and sets according to familiar rhythms. It is an event, an apparition, almost a luminous wound on the vault of the sky. Yet, among all comets, there is one that has accompanied human history like a slow, distant, but recognizable refrain. It returns when maps of the world have changed, when languages are different, when ideas about the cosmos have been transformed. It does not belong to the life of a single individual. It belongs to generations. It is Halley's Comet, even though for much of its millennia-long career it did not yet bear that name. The first documented observation that we can link to it with good certainty dates back to 240 BC, recorded by Chinese astronomers who noted the sky with remarkable discipline. It then reappears in Babylonian tablets from 164 BC. And again, in accounts from eras far removed from one another, as if the same signature were returning on pages written by hands that could never have met. To understand how deep the distance was between the ancient gaze and the modern one, it is enough to remember that for a very long time comets were not considered celestial bodies in the sense we give the term today. Many placed them in the atmosphere, as meteorological phenomena, luminous vapors, fires of the sky. This was not mere superstition. It was a coherent hypothesis within a worldview in which the sphere of the stars was immutable, perfect, incorruptible. If something changed, then it had to happen near the Earth, in the domain of the transient. This idea began to collapse decisively in 1577, when Tycho Brahe studied a great comet and, using accurate measurements of its position in the sky, showed that it had to lie beyond the orbit of the Moon. It was an enormous mental shift. If a comet was truly distant, then it was part of the cosmos, not of the air. And if it was part of the cosmos, then it could obey laws, not merely portents. That transformation did not occur in a single day. Fears, symbols, apocalyptic readings continued to exist. The comet entered art and collective memory. In 1066, a cometary apparition is depicted in the Bayeux tapestry as a sign bearing on the fate of kings and battles. In 1301, a passage of Halley's Comet was so striking that, a few years later, Giotto painted above Bethlehem a star that is not a star. It has the form of a comet, with a tail that seems to move. From then on, in the popular imagination, the idea of the nativity, star, has often taken the shape of a comet, not because ancient texts demand it, but because that image has an irresistible visual power. But what is a comet, really? Its nucleus is a relatively small body, often only a few kilometers across, composed of ices and dust, frozen water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, ammonia, and rocky grains mixed together like a primordial dough. When the comet remains far from the sun, it is almost invisible, a dark fragment moving through the cold. When it approaches, however, heat causes the ices to sublimate, that is, to transform directly into gas. That gas drags dust along with it, creating a coma, a kind of temporary atmosphere. And from that coma the tails are born. In reality, there are at least two tails, one of dust, curved and delicate, and one of ionized gas, straighter, guided by the solar wind and magnetic fields. There is a detail that surprises almost everyone the first time. The tail does not follow the comet like the smoke from a train. It always points away from the sun. The comet races on, but its trail obeys a different direction, as if the sun were pushing it away with an invisible pressure. If a comet is an object, then it orbits. And if it orbits, then it can return. Here the decisive passage comes into play, transforming a legendary presence into a problem of calculation. At the end of the 17th century, Isaac Newton formulated the law of universal gravitation, showing that the same force capable of making an apple fall also governs the dance of the planets. In that new world, an English astronomer, Edmond Halley, a friend and supporter of Newton, realized that gravitation did not stop with the planets. It had to apply to comets as well. Halley began to compare observations and accounts, looking for similarities in trajectories, inclinations, and in the way the object crossed the vault of the sky. He found 3 apparitions in 1531, 1607, and 1682, so similar as to suggest a bold idea. Not 3 different comets, but a single comet returning. At that point, the question was no longer, what does it mean, but, when will it return? And it is precisely here that the story accelerates, because a prediction written before an event, if it comes true, forever changes the way we look at the sky and at ourselves. In 1705, Halley put down in black and white a result that tasted of challenge. That comet would return at the end of 1758, or shortly thereafter. He was aware that he would not live to see the confirmation with his own eyes, and yet he left it as a legacy, a promise to the scientific community. It was not a prophecy in the ancient sense, but a prediction in the modern one, founded on a physical law, on observational data, on calculations. Halley also knew another important thing: the orbit would not be perfectly regular. The giant planets, especially Jupiter and Saturn, would slightly disturb the trajectory, like enormous hands brushing a grain of sand. For this reason, other mathematicians and astronomers in the following years refined the calculations, introducing ever more accurate corrections. When the night between December 24 and 25, 1758 arrived, a farmer near Dresden reported a comet in the sky. A few weeks later, the astronomer Charles Messier observed it systematically. The confirmation struck like a hammer blow: the comet had returned. The sky, in that moment, ceased to be merely a theater of portents and became a laboratory. A law written on Earth had proved valid even for an object crossing deep space. That turning point did not erase emotions, nor did it extinguish fantasies. It made them more complex. Because now human beings could do something new: wait for a celestial event with a date in mind. No longer merely fear it or celebrate it, but prepare for it. And indeed, when Halley's comet returned in 1910, it did so in a world already traversed by newspapers, mass printing, and rapid communication capable of amplifying enthusiasms and fears. The comet was photographed, followed, discussed. And it was precisely then that one of the most revealing episodes of collective psychology in the face of the cosmos was born: the story of the poisonous gas in the tail. With the first spectroscopic analyses, it was discovered that molecules such as cyanogen were present in the tail. It is a substance that, under certain conditions, can be toxic. That was enough for some sensationalist headlines to begin speaking of a tail capable of poisoning Earth's atmosphere, especially because, in those days, the Earth would pass through part of the tail. A famous popularizer of the time, Camille Flammarion, helped make popular the idea that this passage could have catastrophic consequences. The more cautious scientific community immediately emphasized an essential point: a comet's tail is extremely rarefied, more similar to an imperfect vacuum than to a dense cloud. Even passing through it, the atmosphere would have nothing measurable to fear. And yet, fear took on a life of its own. Gas masks were sold, satirical postcards appeared about the imminent end of the world, and the comet became a magnifying glass for the anxieties of a society entering a tumultuous century. In that same year, 1910, another detail made the story even more intense, as if the comet had decided to play with symbols. Mark Twain, born in 1835 during a previous passage of Halley's Comet, liked to repeat that he had come in with the comet and would go out with it. It was not a scientific statement, it was poetry mixed with fatalism. And chance had it that Twain died on April 21, 1910, the day after the comet's perihelion, the point in its orbit closest to the Sun. Even those who do not believe in signs feel a shiver in the face of such precise coincidences, because they show how ready we are to weave our lives together with the rhythms of the sky. By this point, however, Halley's Comet was no longer merely an object observed from afar. The 20th century brought a further leap, the possibility of encountering a comet in space. When Halley returned in 1986, the apparition was not among the most spectacular to the naked eye, partly because of the unfavorable geometry of the orbit relative to the Earth. But it was a historic passage for another reason. A European probe, called Giotto in honor of the painter who had made it iconic in medieval skies, flew close to the nucleus and photographed it. And there, another piece of romantic imagery collapsed. The nucleus was not a luminous jewel, not a perfect sphere. It was dark, irregular, asymmetrical, more like a fragment of coal than a pure, celestial object. And yet, precisely that ugliness was a form of scientific beauty, because it told the true nature of comets. Not wandering stars, but cold archives of the primordial solar system. Comets are like time capsules. They formed in the outer regions of the solar system, where the cold preserved extremely ancient materials. When a comet releases gas and dust, it is literally exposing substances that have remained almost unchanged for billions of years. It is as if the solar system, for a brief period, were opening a box sealed since the childhood of the planets. This is why space missions that study comets are so precious. They do not pursue only a spectacular phenomenon, but seek information about original chemistry, about the building blocks that constructed worlds and, indirectly, about the history of the matter we now call life. There is even a fascinating hypothesis, discussed for decades, according to which comets and asteroids may have contributed to bringing part of Earth's water and organic molecules. It is not a comforting fairy tale. It is an open, investigable question, one that makes comets even closer, because it connects an object that seems remote with what we drink and with what we are. Halley's Comet completes an orbit in an average time of about 76 years, but that value is not a rigid metronome. Each passage is slightly different because the gravitational perturbations of the giant planets modify the orbital energy, and because the comet, losing gas and dust, undergoes small jets that can act like tiny natural thrusters. It is a wonderful detail. While we imagine it as a rock going around, it is also a machine that, as it approaches the sun, ignites and puffs, imperceptibly changing its own destiny. This is why modern predictions are accurate but always accompanied by calculations and corrections. The great difference compared to the past is that today we know where to look, when to look, and why. And so Halley's Comet becomes a measure of human time. If a person sees it as a child or as a young adult, they will usually not see it again in old age. Not because it is impossible to live long enough, but because each individual life is a brief interval compared to the rhythm of that return. And then the comet changes role. It is no longer an ominous portent, but a bridge between generations. Those who saw it in 1910 belonged to a world about to be shaken by wars and radical transformations. Those who saw it in 1986 already lived in the space age and could imagine probes reaching it. Those who will see it at the next return, predicted for 2061, will inhabit a future we can only intuit today. Perhaps there will be new missions, perhaps instruments capable of analyzing the composition of the nucleus with incredible precision, perhaps even attempts to gently alter the orbit of small bodies for planetary defense reasons. A field of study that is growing precisely because we have learned to treat these objects as part of a physical system, not as whims of fate. And yet, even with all our knowledge, an ancient sensation remains intact. When a comet appears, one does not look at it only with the mind. One looks at it with the body. One senses the scale of the phenomenon, the disproportion between us and that trace. One perceives that the light we see is not its own light, but a reflection and a scattering, matter transforming under the sun's radiation. One perceives that what seems solid is in fact fragile, that what seems eternal is in fact consumable. Halley's comet, at each return, loses a little of itself. It does not disappear immediately, but it changes, and this makes it even more similar to a human story. We too return, in different forms, through memory, culture, stories, and each time something changes. Perhaps the deepest reason for the fame of Halley's comet is not its beauty, nor the fact that it is unique. There are comets that are brighter, more unexpected, more dramatic. Its fame arises from the fact that it became the symbol of a mental passage, from an interpreted universe to an understood universe, without understanding destroying wonder. Halley did not domesticate the comet. He showed that even the apparent eruption of chaos can have a form, a path, a law. And that demonstration had enormous consequences. It strengthened confidence in the idea that the cosmos is legible, that observation and calculation can tear events away from the realm of fear. When it returns in 2061, someone will look up and see, once again, a trail that seems like a gesture. Perhaps they will see it from a lit city, perhaps from a dark desert, perhaps from a ship, perhaps from an orbital observatory. And in that moment, without needing to know ancient dates or the names of astronomers, they will feel the same thing that Chinese chroniclers, medieval monks, artists, scientists, and curious minds of every age have felt. The sense that the sky, from time to time, speaks to us in a different handwriting. Halley's comet brings no secret messages. It brings a more sober and more powerful lesson. Cosmic time does not coincide with ours, but it can intersect with it. And when it does, it reminds us that we are a species capable of transforming an apparition into knowledge, and knowledge into wonder. If you have made it this far, it means you love curiosity as much as we do. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like, write a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It is the best way to support what we do. Your presence truly makes a difference. Until the next exploration.